You think you're better than me? A white police officer, veins bulging in his neck, grabbed her by the arm with brute force. Before Evelyn could even process what was happening, the officer shoved her forward, her head crashing violently against the open oven door. The searing heat pressed into her cheek as pain shot through her skull. She cried out, but her voice was muffled by the sound of her flesh hissing against the metal. The officer leaned in closer, pressing her down harder. "Stay down where you belong," he spat, dripping with contempt. But what he didn't know, what he couldn't even imagine, was that the woman he was brutalizing wasn't just anybody. She wasn't just a black woman cooking dinner in her own home. She was a federal judge, one of the most powerful women in the state. And in that moment, right there in that kitchen, justice itself was under attack. Before I take you deeper into this shocking story, let me ask you this. What would you have done if you witnessed this moment? Would you have stood frozen in fear? Or stepped in, no matter the cost? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because this isn't just a story, it's a mirror of what happens in America every day. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because the deeper we go, the darker and more unbelievable this story becomes. Now, let's rewind. Let's uncover how a respected federal judge ended up with her head slammed into a hot oven by the very people sworn to protect her. That Wednesday evening in Atlanta had started out so ordinary, it was almost forgettable. Judge Evelyn Carter had wrapped up her docket earlier than usual. She spent the day presiding over a mix of family disputes, probation hearings, and a corporate fraud case that had dragged on for weeks. By 4 p.m., she was free, rare for a woman whose calendar was usually packed until sundown. She decided to do something she rarely had time for: cook a full dinner at home. Evelyn was 48, with soft brown skin, sharp almond eyes, and the kind of presence that commanded respect the second she walked into a courtroom. To the public, she was the Iron Gavel, a nickname born from her reputation for fair but firm rulings. But in her private life, she was simply Evelyn, a widow, a mother of one grown son, and a woman who cherished simple things, like jazz records, quiet evenings, and cooking recipes her mother once passed down. That night, she planned to make lemon butter chicken with roasted vegetables. She poured herself a glass of red wine, turned on Coltrane, and let the rhythm of normalcy soothe her. But outside her brownstone home in Atlanta, trouble was already brewing. Two police officers, Sergeant Bradley Miller and Officer Kyle Jennings, were patrolling nearby when a noise complaint came across dispatch. The call didn't even mention Evelyn's house. It was for a block over. But Miller, known for his hair-trigger temper and his not-so-subtle disdain for black residents in the neighborhood, decided to take a look anyway. "They're all the same down here," Miller muttered, steering the cruiser toward Evelyn's quiet street. Jennings, younger and greener, didn't respond. But he didn't stop him either. When they pulled up in front of Evelyn's home, there was no party, no noise, just faint jazz drifting through the window. But Miller's eyes narrowed. "Yeah, let's check this out." Jennings hesitated. "Sir, the call was on Pine Avenue, not here." Miller grinned, mean and sharp. "What, you scared? Come on." That decision, to walk up to a house they had no reason to approach, would spark one of the most explosive confrontations Atlanta had seen in years. Inside, Evelyn was sliding a tray into the oven when she heard the pounding on her door. It wasn't the polite knock of a neighbor or a deliverman. It was the kind of aggressive, rattling knock that carried a warning. She frowned, wiped her hands, and walked to the door. Through the peephole, she saw two officers. She opened it cautiously. "Evening off." "Officers, can I help you?" Miller's eyes swept over her like she was already guilty of something. "Got a noise complaint." Evelyn blinked. "Noise? This is a private residence. I'm cooking dinner. Mind if we take a look?" Miller asked, already stepping forward. "Yes, I do mind," Evelyn said firmly. "You don't have a warrant, and there's no probable cause. I'll have to ask you to leave." Jennings shifted uncomfortably. Miller's jaw clenched. That should have been the end of it. But Miller wasn't about to let a confident black woman shut him down. "Lady, you better watch your tone," he growled. Evelyn's patience thinned. "My tone is the least of your concerns. Unless you have paperwork, I suggest you leave immediately." That one sentence, delivered with the same authority she used in court, was enough to snap something inside Sergeant Miller. Without warning, Miller shoved the door wide and stormed in. Evelyn stumbled back, shocked. "What do you think you're doing?" she demanded. Jennings followed, his face pale but silent. "You hiding something?" Miller sneered, scanning the room. "I'm warning you," Evelyn said, voice steady but laced with steel. "You are trespassing in my home. Get out." But instead of listening, Miller grabbed her by the arm. Evelyn tried to pull free, her legal instincts screaming that this was unlawful. And then, in one brutal motion, he shoved her forward. Her forehead slammed against the edge of the oven door. The heat scalded her skin. Pain exploded behind her eyes. For a moment, everything blurred. Her apron twisted as she fell forward, hands bracing against the oven rack. The chicken tray rattled, spilling juices onto the floor. And Miller, red-faced and snarling, pressed down harder. "This is where you belong," he hissed. Jennings stood frozen, caught between horror and loyalty. And Evelyn, she wasn't just fighting against the force of his grip. She was fighting against centuries of oppression, every ounce of dignity on trial in her own kitchen. Even as pain surged through her, Evelyn's voice broke free. "Do you know who I am?" she gasped. Miller laughed cruelly. "Don't care if you're the Queen of England." But when she finally spat out the words, they cut through the room like a blade. "I'm Judge Evelyn Carter, Federal Court." For the first time, Miller's grip faltered. Jennings' mouth fell open, because in that instant they both realized this wasn't just another woman they could bully. This was a woman whose name could end their careers, whose testimony could shatter their badges. But Miller, blinded by rage and arrogance, doubled down. "You think that scares me?" he snarled, pressing her face closer to the oven's heat. Evelyn cried out in pain. Jennings whispered, "Sergeant, stop." But Miller didn't stop. And outside, a neighbor, drawn by the commotion, was already lifting their phone, recording everything through the kitchen window. The video would go viral before the night was over. But in that moment, Evelyn Carter's life hung in the balance. Would Jennings finally intervene? Would the neighbor rush in? Or would the federal judge, the ironed gavel herself, become another name in the long list of victims silenced by those sworn to protect them? One thing was certain. Atlanta had no idea the storm about to break. The smell of roasted chicken still lingered in the air, but now it was drowned by something sharper, crueler, burned flesh and fear. Judge Evelyn Carter's cheek throbbed against the angry heat of the oven door. The pain radiated down her neck, but she refused to cry out again. To cry was to give him victory. Her kitchen, the place she'd once called her sanctuary, had become her battlefield. And standing over her, like some grotesque overseer, was Sergeant Bradley Miller. His face was crimson, twisted in a sneer that betrayed both hatred and something Evelyn instantly recognized: fear. Fear of her name. Because just seconds earlier, through ragged breaths, she'd spoken the words that shifted the entire room. "I'm Judge Evelyn Carter, Federal Court." For the first time, his grip faltered. Officer Kyle Jennings stood frozen. 26 years old, only 2 years in uniform. His hand twitched near his holster. His pale eyes darted between his sergeant and the judge. "Sergeant," he stammered, voice cracking. "She said she's a federal judge." Miller's head snapped toward him, rage burning hotter than the oven door. "I don't give a damn what she said." But the tremor in his voice betrayed him. Evelyn, even through the pain, noticed it. Years on the bench had sharpened her instincts. She could smell weakness in a man like Miller. And right now, weakness seeped from his pores. Denise Harper gripped her phone so tightly her knuckles went white. She hadn't meant to witness history tonight. She was just a mother of 3, a night shift nurse who'd stepped out to throw away a bag of trash. She noticed the cruiser parked where it didn't belong, then heard the shouting. Curiosity made her pause. But what she saw through that cracked kitchen window made her blood run cold. A police sergeant slamming a black woman's face in her own oven. At first, she couldn't believe it. Then her heart told her she had no choice but to believe. Because she'd seen enough in her own lifetime to know, without video, they'd bury it. Her hands shook as she zoomed in, catching everything. The gleam of the oven's heat on Evelyn's cheek, the twisted sneer on Miller's lips, the paralyzed terror in Jennings' eyes. "God help her," Denise whispered, hitting record. "God help us all." Inside, Evelyn forced herself upright, every muscle screaming in protest. She locked eyes with Miller, voice cracking but unbroken. "You just assaulted a federal judge. Do you understand what that means?" Miller's face hardened. "You think that makes you untouchable? Not tonight." Jennings flinched. "Sergeant, stop. Please, this isn't right." Evelyn's almond eyes, rimmed with tears and fury, narrowed like sharpened steel. "You're finished. Your career, your freedom, everything, you're finished." For the first time, Miller hesitated, and that moment was all Evelyn needed. Her hand darted to the counter, fingers closing around her phone. She dialed. 911. "What's your emergency?" Her voice came ragged but commanding. "This is Judge Evelyn Carter. 2 Atlanta PD officers have just assaulted me in my own home. I need immediate assistance." Silence. The operator blinked at her console. "Ma'am, can you repeat that?" "I said I am Judge Evelyn Carter. Federal court. I am being physically attacked by Sergeant Bradley Miller and Officer Kyle Jennings at my residence." Her words slammed into the call center like a gavel striking oak. Supervisors whipped their heads toward the dispatcher screen. Protocol scrambled. Within seconds, her call was flagged, routed, elevated. Backup units were deployed, not just any units, but those handpicked for high-risk emergencies. Miller had no idea, but the cavalry was already on the way. Jennings' chest rose and felt like a man drowning. He wasn't supposed to be here. They weren't supposed to even knock on her door. The call had been for another block. And now this. Assaulting a sitting federal judge. Every word Evelyn spoke echoed in his skull. Federal. Judge. This wasn't just career-ending. It was life-ending. He swallowed hard. "Sergeant, we need to go. Now. Right now." Miller turned on him like a wolf. "You walk out that door, you're finished. You hear me? Finished. You're either with me, or you're nothing." Jennings got twisted. His training told him to follow orders. His conscience told him to run. And somewhere deep down, a voice whispered, "You just watch your sergeant commit a felony." And that's when the first flash of red and blue spilled across the curtains. Sirens wailed. Doors slammed. Boots hit pavement. Miller stiffened. His grip on Evelyn's arm tightened like a vice. "Who called this in?" Evelyn's lips curled, blood staining her teeth. "I did." Within seconds, her quiet street was flooded with squad cars. Radios crackled. Shadows moved. The kitchen door burst open. 2 more officers rushing in, weapons drawn. "Drop it, Miller," one barked, seeing his baton raised. For a heartbeat, everything froze. Jennings' pulse thundered in his ears. Denise's phone trembled as it captured history. Evelyn braced herself against the counter. Her cheek blistered, but her spirit unbroken. And Miller, caught between his rage and his fear, made the fatal mistake of doubling down. "She's lying," he roared. "She attacked me." Jennings' mouth fell open. "That's not true." The words spilled out, his voice cracking but raw. "That's not what happened." Evelyn's shaking hand rose, pointing. "Check the body cams. My neighbor is recording everything." The room went still. For the first time, the sergeant wasn't the loudest voice in the kitchen. They cuffed Miller, though not gently. He thrashed, spit flying, curses echoing through the small kitchen. But as they dragged him toward the door, his words slashed the air. "You think you've won? You don't know how deep this goes." Jennings slumped against the wall, pale and sweating, whispering, "Oh, God, what did we do?" Evelyn pressed a trembling hand to her blistered cheek. She knew this wasn't over. Men like Miller weren't isolated. They were protected by unions, by superiors, by systems built to shield them from accountability. Her bones ached with more than pain. They ached with the weight of what was coming. Because Miller was right about one thing. She had no idea how deep this went. Outside, Denise Harper ended the recording. Her thumb hovered over the button for just a second. Upload or delete. Her heart pounded. She thought of her children. What if the police came after her? What if she lost her job? But then she thought of Evelyn, her blistered cheek, her burning eyes, her unyielding voice. She hit upload. By midnight, the footage spread through Atlanta like wildfire. By dawn, it was on every news station in the country. The headline blazed: Federal judge assaulted by Atlanta police sergeant in her own kitchen. The world erupted in outrage. But Evelyn Carter knew better than to rest easy, because the system wasn't about to let one of its own fall quietly. And Sergeant Miller's words, "You don't know how deep this goes," would soon prove terrifyingly true. One thing was certain. Evelyn Carter had just declared war against the very system she served. The chant outside Evelyn Carter's home shook the very walls. Justice for Evelyn. Justice for Evelyn. It started with a handful of voices. Now it was hundreds: students, activists, strangers who had only seen her bloodied face on a viral video, but felt like they knew her. Neon signs flickered against the night sky. Reporters crowded the sidewalks, their cameras flashing like strobe lights every time Evelyn dared peek from her curtains. Inside, she sat stiff in a chair, her head bandaged, her jaw aching, the sting of antiseptic still in her nose. But what shook her most wasn't the pain, or even the noise outside. It was the phone. It hadn't stopped ringing. Every line, every hour. Senators, colleagues, reporters. Some messages were filled with outrage, support. Others dripped with venom. And then came the worst one of all. A muffled male voice, distorted. "You've embarrassed the wrong people, Judge Carter. If you think the oven was bad, just wait." Her hands trembled. For the first time in years, Evelyn Carter, one of the toughest federal judges in the state, felt fear coil tight around her ribs. Before we dive deeper into the chaos Judge Evelyn Carter is about to face, let me pause and ask you this. Do you think justice will ever truly be served when the very system meant to protect us is the one silencing victims? I want to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below, and let's start this conversation. And if you're with me in exposing stories like Evelyn's, hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss the next part of this unfolding nightmare. All right, let's get back to it. The video of the oven slam spread like dry brush fire. Clipped and reshared across Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, and every news outlet. It was impossible to ignore. A white cop in uniform, sneering, slamming a black woman's head into a hot oven, followed by the crowd's horrified screams, the smell of burning, the chaos. And then came the caption that detonated the internet. She wasn't just any woman. She's federal Judge Evelyn Carter. That detail flipped everything. This wasn't some nameless civilian brutalized by police. This was the law itself, attacked by one of its own supposed enforcers. The video racked up 20 million views in 24 hours. Hashtags flooded. Hashtag Justice for Evelyn. Hashtag Judges aren't safe. Hashtag Oven Cop. Major networks scrambled for statements. Civil rights leaders compared it to historic atrocities. The president's press secretary promised a thorough review. But while the public raged, Evelyn knew something darker. The machine she'd spent her life working within, the courts, the government, the so-called system of justice, was already moving to bury this. 3 days later, Evelyn found herself in a conference room at the courthouse. Present, the chief judge, 2 senior justices, and a grim-faced U.S. Marshal. The chief judge leaned forward. His voice was smooth, rehearsed. "Evelyn, you've been through an ordeal. But we need you to understand. The integrity of this court must come before personal outrage." "Integrity?" Evelyn hissed. "A cop slammed my head into a hot oven in front of hundreds. And you want me to stay silent?" Another justice sighed. "You know how this works. If we escalate, we delegitimize the force that protects our courts. If we protect you, we undermine them. Either way, the system collapses." Evelyn stared, heart pounding. "So, I'm just collateral?" No one answered. That silence told her everything. The first hit piece dropped that evening. Federal judge caught in altercation. Did Evelyn Carter instigate violence? The article twisted facts, called her confrontational, questioned her mental stability, suggested she was aggressive toward officers. Anonymous sources whispered about erratic behavior on the bench. Within hours, Cable news hosts debated whether Evelyn brought it on herself. And then came the photos. Not of the oven, not of her burns, but of Evelyn on a vacation years ago, in a swimsuit. Cropped, zoomed, captioned, "The Honorable Judge, so-called role model." The message was clear: discredit her, shame her, erase her. Evelyn's daughter, Maya, wasn't spared either. Maya was a deputy U.S. Marshal, sharp, disciplined, and fiercely loyal to her mother. The night the video went viral, she had been the one holding Evelyn upright, shielding her from cameras. Now tabloids called her unprofessional. Conspiracy forums claimed she'd faked her mother's injuries for clout. And then came the threats. Handwritten letters shoved under their door. Burn her again. Judges don't deserve to live. One night, as Maya walked to her car, she noticed her tires slashed. That's when Evelyn broke. Not from pain, not from smear campaigns, but from the realization her fight was endangering the only person she loved most. The turning point came 1 week later. Activists organized a rally downtown. Thousands filled the square, college kids, civil rights lawyers, mothers pushing strollers. Evelyn wasn't supposed to attend, but Maya insisted. "You need to see they're not just watching you, Mom," she said. "They're with you." When Evelyn stepped onto the stage, bandages still on her face, the crowd roared like a tidal wave. She gripped the microphone, voice trembling at first, then firm. "I've spent my life inside the walls of justice. And I tell you this, justice is not safe. Not for me, not for you, not for anyone, until the truth comes out." The crowd erupted, chants echoing into the night. For the first time, Evelyn felt power, not from her robe, but from the people. But as the cheers thundered, Maya's sharp eyes caught something in the crowd. A man standing too still, hands sliding inside his coat. Maya lunged, shoving her mother aside as the crack of a gunshot split the air. The stage lights shattered. Screams tore through the square. Evelyn hit the ground, heart hammering, as the world descended into chaos. Had the bullet found its target? Was the attack just beginning? The viral fight for justice had just turned into a war. The sound of the gunshot didn't just crack the air. It split reality in two. On one side, the roar of a rally, voices chanting justice for Evelyn. In unison, a movement swelling with hope and anger, fists raised high beneath the glow of floodlights. On the other, the chaos of panic, screams ripping through the night, signs and banners trampled under terrified feet, mothers pulling children into their arms, the air suddenly thick with the metallic tang of fear. Federal Judge Evelyn Carter lay on the stage, cheek pressed to the cold metal, breath coming in short gasps. Her ears rang, a hollow echo in her skull. For a split second, she thought the bullet had found her heart, that her fight had ended in a pool of blood before it had even begun. But when she blinked through the blur, she realized she wasn't bleeding. It wasn't her. The shot had been aimed at her daughter. Maya Carter, Deputy U.S. Marshal, fearless protector, Evelyn's only child, had thrown herself between the barrel and her mother. Now she staggered, clutching her side, blood blooming across her crisp uniform like a dark flower unfurling in fast motion. Evelyn's scream tore from her throat, raw and primal. Not the measured tone of a judge, but the desperate wail of a mother watching her world fall apart. And in that instant, the entire rally went from protest to war zone. Before I continue, I need to ask you, what do you think this moment proves? When voices rise for justice, why is the system's first response always violence? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you believe stories like Evelyn's deserve to be told, hit the like button and share this, because the deeper we go, the more dangerous the truth becomes. All right, back to the story. Maya. Evelyn scrambled across the stage, knees bruising against the hard surface as she slipped on her own heels. Her hand shot out, gripping her daughter's wrist. The heat of blood soaked instantly into her palm. Maya's lips trembled. I'm fine, Mom. She wasn't. Blood dripped through her fingers in steady, horrifying beats, each one a countdown Evelyn couldn't stop. The crowd had become a living storm. Protesters ducked, screaming, some diving for cover, others still holding their phones aloft, live streaming the chaos in shaky, panicked frames. A chant had collapsed into a chorus of shrieks. Somewhere in that sea of panic, the shooter was retreating, a tall figure in a dark coat, face hidden, movements calm in the storm. He vanished between bodies as if swallowed whole, leaving behind nothing but a phantom trail of dread. Within seconds, fellow marshals stormed the stage. Boots thundered against the metal floor. Radios crackled with clipped orders. They formed a human shield around Evelyn and Maya, weapons drawn, eyes scanning rooftops and shadows for the telltale glint of a second barrel. "We need medical, now," one roared into his mic. Another yanked open a med kit, pressing gauze hard against Maya's side. She hissed in pain, but refused to let go of her mother's hand. As EMTs shoved their way through the mass of bodies, Evelyn cradled her daughter's head against her lap, whispering the same plea over and over like a mantra, like a prayer. "Stay with me. Please, baby, stay with me." The microphones were still live. The cameras were still rolling. The world saw everything. Her tears streaking down bloodied cheeks, her desperate voice cracking under the weight of terror, her daughter's blood staining her robes. And by dawn, that image would be burned into America's memory. At the hospital, fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, their cold hum the only sound besides Evelyn's restless pacing. The sterile smell of antiseptic clung to her skin, clashed with the metallic stink of dried blood on her clothes. She had refused to change. She wanted the world to see her like this, bloodied, bruised, unbroken. Every few minutes, she froze at the sound of footsteps, praying it was the surgeon. Hours passed. Her chest felt hollow, ribs too tight around her lungs. When the door finally swung open, the surgeon's face was unreadable. Evelyn's knees nearly gave out. "She's stable," he said at last. "The bullet missed her lung by less than an inch. We repaired the damage. She'll recover with time." Evelyn collapsed into the nearest chair, sobbing in relief, hand covering her face. For the first time since the rally, her body shook with something other than adrenaline. But while Evelyn sat in that hallway clinging to hope, another meeting unfolded miles away, one she wasn't invited to. A private conference call between the police union, city officials, and unnamed federal contacts. The language was cold, stripped of humanity. "This situation has escalated beyond control," one voice said. "The judge has become a symbol. The incident must be reframed." Another chimed in, tone clipped. "Public sympathy must be redirected. If necessary, sacrifices will be made." Sacrifices. Evelyn Carter's life and reputation were nothing more than bargaining chips. By morning, the headlines twisted like poison knives. Chaos at Carter rally. Violence erupts. Judge's daughter shot amid unrest. Did Evelyn Parker provoke violence with divisive rhetoric? The shooter was barely mentioned. The rally, once framed as peaceful, was now painted as hostile. Evelyn's speech, words of truth and defiance, were chopped into fragments, rearranged to make her sound reckless, inflammatory. Cable news panels lit up in split screens, commentators debating whether she had incited civil unrest, some even suggesting the shot had come from within the crowd itself, as if the movement had turned on her. Meanwhile, social media flooded with doctored clips, false rumors, conspiracy threads. Bots swarmed her name, burying sympathy beneath a tidal wave of what-ifs and maybes. It wasn't sloppiness. It wasn't coincidence. It was orchestration, and Evelyn knew it. Someone wanted her silenced. And Maya's blood on that stage, that had been the warning. 3 days later, as Maya slept fitfully in her hospital bed, Evelyn sat rigid in the corner chair, exhaustion etched into her bones. That was when the man came. Not a colleague, not a friend. A man in a black suit, pressed so sharply it seemed to cut through the air itself. No badge, no name, just a presence that made the fluorescent lights flicker. He didn't knock. He simply appeared in the doorway, eyes cold, smile thin. He leaned close, voice calm, controlled, like a banker discussing a loan. "You've embarrassed powerful men, Judge Carter. What happened at that rally? That wasn't a mistake. That was a message. Evelyn's jaw tightened, fire sparking behind her eyes. Tell your powerful men I don't scare easy. The man smirked, leaning even closer until she could smell his cologne. Expensive, clinical. You should, because next time, we won't aim for the side. And just like that, he was gone. No sound of footsteps. No shadow in the hall. As if the hospital itself had swallowed him whole. That night, Evelyn sat beside her daughter's bed, watching the slow rise and fall of her chest. Machines beeped softly, a fragile reassurance that life still clung to her. For years, she had fought battles inside a courtroom, believing the law could hold men accountable, believing justice was a system that, though imperfect, could be bent toward truth. But now she understood. The battlefield had shifted. This wasn't about statutes or rulings. It wasn't about legal briefs or gavel strikes. This was about survival. Her survival, Maya's survival, and the survival of truth itself. If the system was determined to bury her, she would dig her way out with her bare hands. But Evelyn Carter also knew something terrifying. When you fight monsters within the system fights back harder. And the men in those shadows weren't done. Not even close. The next morning, Evelyn returned to her hotel room, exhaustion wrapped tight around her shoulders. But waiting at the door was an envelope. Unmarked, thin, slid beneath the threshold while she had been away. Her hands trembled as she tore it open. Inside was a single photograph. Maya, lying in her hospital bed, eyes closed in sleep. And standing over her, blurred but unmistakable, the shooter. The message was clear. We can reach her. Anytime. Evelyn's breath hitched. The photo slipped from her hand, fluttering to the floor. For the first time in her career, after decades of sentencing criminals, standing firm against corruption, staring down threats, she felt the true depth of helplessness. This wasn't about law anymore. It was war. The smell of antiseptic clung to the air, heavy and sterile, as though it wanted to choke out the scent of life itself. Evelyn sat stiff in the rigid hospital chair, her robe from last night still wrapped around her like a shield. On the bed, her daughter Maya stirred, tubes running from her arms, the heart monitor ticking a steady but fragile rhythm. Evelyn's eyes burned, not from exhaustion, though God knew she hadn't closed her eyes in nearly 2 days, but from rage. Rage that had been simmering since the night a so-called officer of the law shoved her face toward a burning oven. Rage that had only deepened when they fired bullets in her home. And now, rage that sat heavy because her daughter was lying here, broken because of it. Maya shifted and Evelyn leaned in. Baby, I'm here. Her daughter's eyelids fluttered open. She whispered, voice hoarse and fragile. Mom, they were aiming for you, weren't they? The question gutted Evelyn. She had prayed Maya would never realize, never connect the dots, never carry that burden. But her daughter was sharp, too sharp to believe in coincidence. Yes, Evelyn admitted softly, her hand gripping Maya's. But they won't get away with it. I promise you that. The words were steel, but inside Evelyn trembled, because a threat had arrived just hours before, slipped under the crack of her hotel-turned-safe house door in the middle of the night. A photograph of her and Maya, taken only hours earlier. Smiling, eating ice cream, and scrawled across the bottom in thick black marker. Even here, we see you. On the morning news, Evelyn's face flashed beside words like disgraced judge and radical agenda. Anonymous sources painted her as unstable, corrupt, and vengeful. She hadn't been surprised. The system always fought hardest when it was cornered. Still, Evelyn could feel the walls closing in. When the door opened with a creak, she spun, heart racing. But it wasn't an assassin. It was a nurse, small, middle-aged, with deep lines around her eyes. She looked around nervously before approaching Evelyn. Judge Carter, the nurse whispered. Evelyn stiffened. Yes. The nurse pressed something into her palm. A folded scrap of paper. Hurried handwriting scrawled across it. Evelyn opened it discreetly, her stomach dropping as she read. There's a mole inside. Don't trust the uniforms. Before Evelyn could respond, the nurse was gone, wheeling a cart down the hallway as though she had never been there at all. Evelyn folded the note back, her pulse thundering. A mole inside? That explained too much. The threats, the timing, the way her safe house had been compromised. Someone with access was feeding her enemies information. But who? She turned back to Maya. Her daughter was dozing now, her breathing shallow but steady. Evelyn wanted to stay glued to her side, but the note burned in her pocket. She needed to think, to plan. The day stretched into uneasy hours. Doctors came and went, adjusting medications. The media outside grew louder. At one point, Evelyn caught sight of Detective Harris in the hallway, a man who had sworn to protect her. His eyes lingered too long on Maya's door. His smile was too tight. Evelyn felt the hair rise on the back of her neck. "Trust no one," the nurse had said. Night fell. The hospital lights dimmed. Evelyn dozed in the chair, head against the wall. For the first time in days, sleep tugged at her. It lasted less than 20 minutes. A sound jolted her awake. The steady beep of the heart monitor had stopped. Evelyn leapt to her feet. Maya's bed was empty. The sheets were tossed back, for tubes discarded on the floor. Her heart nearly exploded. "Maya," she whispered hoarsely. She ran to the door, flung it open. The hallway was empty. Silent. Too silent. Her eyes fell on the small table by the bed. A single sheet of paper lay there, crisp white under the fluorescent lights. Hands trembling, Evelyn picked it up. In bold black letters, the words seared in her mind. The system can't protect her. Can you? Her knees nearly buckled. She pressed the note to her chest, her breath ragged. They hadn't just come for her. They had taken her daughter. And Evelyn Carter, judge, survivor, fighter, now faced the most terrifying trial of her life. Maya has vanished from the hospital under the watch of a mole, and Evelyn is left with a chilling ultimatum. The room was empty. Not just empty, hollow, like someone had scooped out Evelyn's world and left only silence. Maya's hospital bed was neatly made, her foreline dangling uselessly to the side, the heart monitor still ticking faintly, as if mocking Evelyn. The faint smell of antiseptic burned her nostrils, but beneath it lingered something else, fear. On the pillow lay a single folded piece of paper. Her hands trembled as she unfolded it. The handwriting was jagged, rushed, but the words were clear. The system can't protect her. Can you? Her stomach dropped. Evelyn staggered backward, clutching the note like it might explain itself if she squeezed hard enough. And then the panic set in. Maya was gone. Evelyn's scream tore through the sterile corridor of the hospital. Nurses and orderlies rushed toward her, faces wide-eyed, questions firing. What happened? She was just here. No one came in or out. There's security at every. But Evelyn wasn't listening. She was already running, shoving past the startled staff. Her heels clicked furiously against the linoleum as she tore through the hallway, checking doors, bathrooms, stairwells. Nothing. Detective Harris appeared at the end of the corridor, his face grim. "Judge, stop. She's gone," Evelyn shouted, shoving the note into his chest. "Read it." He scanned it quickly, his jaw tightening. "Lock this place down," he barked to the nearest officer. "Nobody leaves. Nobody." But Evelyn could see it, the faintest flicker in his eyes. That hesitation, that calculation. She didn't trust him. Not fully. Not anymore. Hours blurred. The hospital became a cage of flashing red and blue, of radios crackling orders, of nurses crying in corners. But Maya was nowhere. Evelyn sat in a small waiting room. The note clenched so tight it cut her palm. She stared at Harris as he spoke quietly with another officer. They looked too calm, too rehearsed. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Her breath caught as she swiped. A distorted voice slithered through the line. "You'll never see her again if you keep letting them lead. The people you trust? They're the ones who gave her away." Click. The call ended. Evelyn's chest seized. She whipped her head toward Harris, who was still talking, his voice low and deliberate. Did he know? Was he part of it? At midnight, Evelyn slipped out of the hospital chaos and into the parking lot, her mind racing. She replayed the words, "The system can't protect her. So who could?" Her car felt like a coffin as she sat in the driver's seat, staring at the glowing city skyline. And then she noticed it, a second note tucked under her windshield wiper. She snatched it, unfolding with shaking hands. You want her back? Follow the truth. Start where the fire began. Evelyn's blood ran cold. The fire. 3 years ago, she presided over a case that uncovered corruption in the police union. A warehouse burned down, destroying key evidence. She always suspected it wasn't an accident. Now someone wanted her to revisit it. The remains of the warehouse sat on the edge of town, fenced off and half swallowed by weeds. Evelyn parked a block away, her hands tight on the steering wheel. The place reeked of ash and secrets. She climbed the fence, scraping her palms, landing hard on the other side. Her flashlight cut through the dark, illuminating charred beams and collapsed roofing. And then she heard it. A shuffle. A footstep. Who's there? She snapped, her voice steady despite her pounding heart. Silence. She pressed deeper inside, beams creaking under her weight. And there, spray painted fresh on a blackened wall, words that froze her blood. We have her. Stop digging or she burns too. Her knees nearly buckled. Maya. They had been here. Recently. Evelyn turned, desperate to escape, and nearly slammed into a figure. He was tall, hooded, face half hidden by shadow. He raised his hand slowly. Judge Carter, he said, his voice low, urgent. I'm not here to hurt you. Then who the hell are you? She demanded, keeping her flashlight trained on him. Someone who knows what they're planning. Someone who doesn't want her daughter to die. He pulled something from his jacket and tossed it at her feet. A flash drive. Everything you need is on there. But you can't trust Harris. You can't trust anyone in uniform. They've been bought. Evelyn's skin prickled. What do you mean? But headlights flashed at the far end of the warehouse. Police cruisers. Sirens. The hooded man cursed. Too late. He bolted through a side exit, vanishing into the dark. Minutes later, Harris stormed in with half a dozen officers. What the hell are you doing here? He barked. Evelyn's grip tightened on the flash drive hidden in her fist. I could ask you the same, she shot back. His eyes narrowed, scanning her face like he was searching for cracks. You're obstructing an investigation. Let's handle this. But Evelyn wasn't about to hand him the one lead she had. She slipped the flash drive in her pocket and forced her expression flat. Then handle it, she said coldly, pushing past him. But inside, her pulse was a drumbeat of dread. Back in her apartment, Evelyn locked every door and pulled her laptop close. Her fingers shook as she slid the flash drive in. A folder blinked open. Inside, dozens of files, photos, documents. And a video. She clicked it. The screen flickered to life. A grainy recording of a dim room. A girl tied to a chair. A girl with bruised wrists and terror in her eyes. Maya. Evelyn's scream echoed off the walls. And then a man stepped into the frame. His face was hidden by a mask, but his voice was unmistakable. Detective Harris. The video froze as Evelyn's laptop abruptly shut down, the screen black. The flash drive sparked faintly in the port before dying completely. Her only evidence gone. Her daughter, still captive. And the man leading the investigation, the one she was supposed to trust, was the monster holding Maya hostage. Evelyn's chest heaved, her world spiraling. She had no idea who to run to, who to call. And then her phone rang again. She answered, breathless. Maya's voice came through, trembling, muffled. Mom, help me. Followed by Harris's cold voice. You want her back? Then give us what we want. Click. Silence. Evelyn dropped the phone, her vision blurring. Her daughter's life hung on a knife's edge. And now, so did the truth. The night Evelyn Carter discovered her own daughter's life was dangling on the strings of a conspiracy, she felt a new kind of fear, one that stripped her down to bone and marrow. The call still echoed in her ears. Maya's trembling voice. Harris's calm ultimatum. It was all she could hear, louder than her own heartbeat, louder than the rain drumming against her kitchen window. The man she had once trusted to lead the investigation was not only corrupt, he was the abductor. Her knees buckled, hands gripping the counter as her breath came in jagged pulls. For a brief moment, Evelyn let herself collapse. She sobbed into her sleeve, letting years of bottled grief and exhaustion flow out like poison. She thought of her husband, long buried, and of how she had sworn to keep Maya safe at any cost. And here she was, powerless. But that moment of weakness lasted only seconds. She rose, wiping her face. "If the system is this rotten," she whispered, "then I'll burn it down myself." The phone rang again. Harris's voice slithered through the line. "You know the deal, Judge Carter. Those sealed federal files. You bring them to me tonight. If you don't," his voice trailed off, followed by Maya's muffled sobs in the background, "then you'll lose the only person you have left." The files. Evelyn knew exactly which ones. Buried in her chambers was a sealed case file tied to the burned warehouse investigation. Documents that named police union leaders, wealthy officials, and the cover-ups that had protected them for years. She had fought to keep them sealed, thinking the case wasn't yet airtight. But Harris knew. If she handed them over, the truth would die. If she refused, Maya would. Her hand shook. She hung up before she could answer. She wasn't alone. That same night, a knock came at her door. She opened it to find the hooded stranger from the warehouse, standing in the shadows. This time he pulled back his hood. He wasn't some anonymous avenger. He was Cole Maddox, an investigative journalist. Years ago, he had infiltrated the police union as a false recruit, gathering evidence. But before he could publish, his contacts were silenced. His editor was found dead in what was ruled a car accident. Cole had been in hiding ever since, waiting for someone strong enough to take the fight public. Now he stood in her living room, eyes blazing. Harris isn't acting alone. There's a cabal inside law enforcement, a network of enforcers who make problems disappear. You're not the first they've gone after. But if you fight this, Judge, you'll be stepping outside the law. Once you cross that line, you can't go back. Evelyn glanced at a framed photo of Maya on the mantel. Her choice was already made. "Then I'll cross it." They worked through the night. Evelyn retrieved the sealed files, but instead of giving Harris what he wanted, she and Cole crafted a decoy, a flash drive with just enough bait to make it believable. Inside her jacket, Cole stitched trackers, microphones, and a hidden transmitter linked to a private server. The plan: live-stream the confrontation. Harris's words, his threats, his face, all exposed to thousands before he realized what was happening. But the risk gnawed at Evelyn. Harris wasn't stupid. If he suspected a trap, Maya could die before help arrived. She steeled herself anyway. This ends tonight. The meeting point was as cinematic as it was deadly, an abandoned train yard at midnight. Rusted boxcars lined the tracks, the air thick with fog. Evelyn walked forward, every step echoing. In her hand was the decoy flash drive. From the shadows, Harris emerged. He wasn't alone. Maya was bound and gagged beside him, her wrists bruised from rope. Behind them stood masked officers, the cabal's enforcers, rifles gleaming under the floodlights. Harris's smirk stretched across his face. "I knew you'd come. Always the hero, Judge Carter. But tell me, how does it feel knowing all your years on the bench meant nothing? That the law you worshipped is just a costume for men like me?" Evelyn's voice cracked, but her stare was steel. "You're a coward hiding behind a badge. You think this ends with you holding my daughter? No, this ends with you exposed." Harris laughed darkly. "Exposed? I burned that warehouse. I ordered the shooting at your home. Every attack, every warning, that was me. And look at you now, broken, alone, handing me exactly what I asked for." He reached for the drive, but before his fingers touched it, chaos erupted. One of the masked enforcers suddenly turned his rifle, not on Evelyn, but on Harris. He looked out at the city skyline, is still coming. Later, as Evelyn drove Maya home through the quiet streets, exhaustion settling into her bones, her phone buzzed. She glanced down. A single text message lit up the screen. "You cut off one head, but the serpent lives." Her grip tightened on the wheel. She looked at Maya, asleep against the window, then at the endless dark road ahead. The war wasn't over, but Evelyn Carter had already chosen her side. This story isn't just about Evelyn Carter, her daughter Maya, or even the corrupt investigator Harris. It's about the bigger truth we all live with. Corruption, betrayal, and abuse of power don't just exist in books or films. They are real dangers in our world. But here's the lesson Evelyn's fight teaches us. silence protects the guilty, while courage protects the innocent. The system doesn't heal itself. It takes brave people willing to stand up, speak out, and fight for justice even when it costs them everything. Think about your own life. Maybe you're not a judge or a journalist, but every day you face choices, whether to stay silent or to speak the truth, whether to let fear control you or to protect what matters most. Let Evelyn's story remind us all. The serpent only survives when good people stop fighting. If this story moved you, please leave a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because your voice matters, and together, we can shed light on the darkest corners of our world. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more true and powerful stories where silence is broken and justice is revealed. Because here, we don't just tell stories. We uncover truth.